They mocked her on a blind date, until a billionaire single father chose to love her instead. The night everything changed. The setup. The evening air carried the scent of expensive wine and fresh basil as Olivia Bennet wheeled herself through. The entrance of Giovanni's, the most exclusive Italian restaurant in downtown Seattle. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a mixture of hope and dread churning in her stomach. The emerald green dress she wore hugged her frame perfectly, chosen specifically for tonight by her well-meaning cousin, who had insisted it was time for Olivia to get back out there. At 25, Olivia had learned that hope was a dangerous companion. 3 years had passed since the accident that left her paralyzed from the waist down, and in those 3 years, she had watched people's eyes shift from her face to her wheelchair, their expressions changing from interest to pity in seconds. But tonight, her cousin Rachel had promised, would be different. The man she was meeting was a friend of a friend, someone who knew about her situation and didn't care. The restaurant hummed with quiet conversations and clinking glasses. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across cream-colored walls adorned with original Italian artwork. Olivia navigated through the tables with practiced grace, her chair's motor barely audible beneath the soft jazz playing overhead. She found her reserved table near the window, where the city lights twinkled like scattered diamonds against the darkening sky. The betrayal. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Olivia checked her phone repeatedly, each glance at the screen tightening, the knot in her chest. Maybe he was running late. Maybe traffic was bad. Maybe he had second thoughts about dating a woman in a wheelchair. The answer came in the worst possible way. A group of 5 young men approached her table, their expensive suits and confident swagger marking them as the type who had never been told no. The one leading them, a tall guy with slicked-back dark hair and a smirk that made Olivia's skin crawl, pulled out the chair across from her and sat down without asking. "You must be Olivia," he said, his voice dripping with false enthusiasm. "Wow, the pictures didn't do you justice." Confusion flickered across Olivia's face. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" "I'm Tyler," he said, gesturing to his friends who had gathered around the table like vultures. "Your date." Relief flooded through her briefly, quickly replaced by unease. Something felt wrong. The way his friends were snickering, holding up their phones, the cruel gleam in Tyler's eyes. "We heard it was your birthday," one of them said loudly, drawing attention from nearby tables. "We wanted to make it special." Before Olivia could respond, a waiter appeared carrying a small birthday cake, complete with lit candles and pink frosting. She hadn't told anyone it was her birthday. How did they know? "Happy birthday to you," Tyler began singing, his voice mocking and off-key. His friends joined in, their laughter barely contained. Other diners turned to watch, some smiling at what they assumed was a sweet gesture. Olivia's hands gripped the armrests of her wheelchair. This wasn't right. This wasn't how surprises were supposed to feel. Then it happened. Tyler reached forward, scooped a handful of frosting from the cake, and smeared it across Olivia's cheek. His friends erupted in laughter, phones held high, recording every second of her humiliation. Another guy grabbed more frosting and dabbed it on her forehead. The cake tipped, tumbling into her lap, pink frosting staining her beautiful emerald dress. "Smile for the camera," one of them shouted. "A girl in a wheelchair looking for love," Tyler announced to his friends. "This is pure gold. Wait until this goes viral." The restaurant seemed to freeze. Conversation stopped. Forks paused halfway, to mouths. Everyone watched, but no one moved, no one helped. Olivia sat there, frosting dripping down her face, cake crumbling in her lap, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. The humiliation was complete. She wanted to disappear, to wheel herself out and never be seen again. But her body wouldn't move. She was trapped in this moment, displayed like a joke for everyone to witness. The intervention then, cutting through the cruel laughter like a blade, came a child's voice. "Daddy, why is that pretty lady crying?" The laughter faltered. At a table, near the window, sat a little girl with wild auburn curls and eyes the color of warm honey. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old, and she was staring at Olivia with genuine concern. her small hand tugging at her father's sleeve. The man beside her turned. Julian Cross was in his mid-30s, with dark hair touched with silver, at the temples and eyes that had seen too much pain. He wore a simple black suit that couldn't hide the power in his shoulders or the authority in his bearing. When his gaze landed on Olivia, on her tear-streaked face and ruined dress, something shifted in his expression. He stood without a word. The restaurant held its breath. Julian walked past Tyler and his friends without acknowledging them, his focus entirely on Olivia. He pulled out the chair beside her and sat down, then did something that made her heart stop. He took her hand in his grip warm and steady and utterly unashamed. "She's with me," he said quietly, his voice carrying across the silent restaurant. The words hit like thunder. Tyler's smirk vanished. His friends lowered their phones, suddenly aware of the shift in the room. People were watching them now, and not with amusement. Several diners recognized Julian, whispers spreading like wildfire. "That's Julian Cross, the CEO, the billionaire, the man who had lost his wife 3 years ago and hadn't been seen with anyone since." "We were just having fun," Tyler stammered, his bravado crumbling. Julian didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on Olivia, his thumb gently brushing across her knuckles. "Leave," he said simply. They left. The restaurant slowly returned to life, conversations resuming in hushed tones. Julian pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and carefully wiped the frosting from Olivia's face, his movements gentle and respectful. "I'm Julian," he said softly. "And that little hurricane over there is my daughter, Emma." Olivia's voice came out as a whisper. "Why did you do that?" "Because 3 years ago, someone I loved sat in a hospital bed covered in bruises and broken bones, and strangers walked past without stopping. I swore I'd never walk past someone who needed help again." Before Olivia could respond, Emma appeared at her side, clutching a napkin. "You're really pretty," the little girl said shyly, "like my mommy was. Don't cry anymore, okay?" Something inside Olivia cracked. Not broke, but opened. For the first time in 3 years, she felt seen. Not pitied, not mocked, just seen. The confession Julian ordered new meals for both of them while Olivia excused herself to the restroom to clean up as best she could. When she returned, Emma had moved to her father's lap, but kept stealing glances at Olivia, her young face full of curiosity. They talked through dinner. Julian spoke about his late wife, Elena, who had died in a drunk driving accident 3 years ago. The same kind of accident that had left Olivia paralyzed. He talked about learning to be both mother and father to Emma, about the guilt that still haunted him, about feeling like he had failed the woman he loved by not protecting her. Olivia listened and for the first time shared her own story, the accident, the abandonment by her parents who couldn't handle having a disabled daughter, living with her aunt who treated charity like a weapon, the ex-boyfriend who had told her he couldn't see a future with someone in a wheelchair. "People see the chair before they see me," Olivia said quietly. "They decide who I am before I even open my mouth." Julian leaned forward. "I see a woman who showed up tonight despite every reason not to. I see someone who held her head high even when the world was cruel. That takes more strength than most people will ever have." Emma suddenly tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, can she come home with us?" Julian smiled, something that looked unpracticed, like a muscle he hadn't used in years. "Maybe someday, sweetheart." As the evening ended, Julian helped Olivia outside where her taxi waited. Before she could say goodbye, he pressed his business card into her hand. "I'm not trying to rescue you," he said. "I'm just asking if you'd like to have coffee sometime, as equals, as two people who understand what it means to survive." Olivia looked down at the card, then back at Julian. Emma waved enthusiastically from behind him. "I'd like that," Olivia said, and meant it. She didn't know it then, but tucked inside her purse was something else. A small silver watch that had belonged to Julian's late wife. Emma had slipped it in when Olivia wasn't looking, along with a note in childish handwriting. "Mommy would want you to have it." When Olivia found it later that night, she cried. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming feeling of being welcomed into something precious. Rising together, The revelation. 2 weeks passed before Olivia found the courage to look at the watch closely. It was beautiful. Delicate silver with an elegant face that had stopped at 3:47. The time of Elena's death, she realized with a pang. But what made her breath catch was the inscription on the back. To Elena, who stopped time when she smiled. Forever yours, Jay. Olivia ran her finger over the engraved words, then noticed something else. A tiny jeweler's mark she recognized. She wheeled to her desk and pulled out a folder she hadn't opened in months, filled with hospital bills and insurance documents from her accident. Her hands shook as she flipped through the pages, searching for one specific document. There, a receipt from the rehabilitation center, marked anonymous donation, $50,000. The donation that had paid for her first 6 months of physical therapy, the therapy that had taught her how to live in her new reality. She had never known who sent it. But now, holding the watch, she noticed the business name printed at the bottom of the donation receipt, Cross Technologies. Julian had saved her before he ever knew her name. The confrontation. The bookstore where Olivia worked part-time was quiet on Tuesday morning, the usual refuge of soft music and rustling pages. She was shelving books in the self-help section when the door chimes jangled harshly. Her Aunt Victoria swept in like a storm, her designer handbag swinging, her face twisted with anger. "There you are," Victoria snapped loudly enough for the few customers to turn and stare. Playing at independence again. Olivia's stomach dropped. "Aunt Victoria, what are you doing here?" "I heard about your little boyfriend," Victoria said, her voice dripping with disdain. "The rich CEO. Did you really think he'd stay interested? Did you think he'd actually want damaged goods?" "Please keep your voice down," Olivia said, her face burning. "Why? Embarrassed?" Victoria crossed her arms. "You should be. I've sacrificed everything for you. Taken you into my home, paid for your chair, your therapy, everything. And this is how you repay me? By chasing after some man who's clearly just using you for good PR?" A customer whispered to her companion. Another pulled out a phone. Olivia wanted to disappear. "I never asked you for any of that," Olivia said quietly. "Oh, you didn't need to ask. You couldn't do anything yourself. You're helpless, useless. You should be grateful anyone tolerates you at all, let alone—" "That's enough." The voice came from the back of the store. Julian emerged from between the shelves, Emma's hand clasped in his. His expression was calm, but his eyes held the kind of cold fury that made Victoria take an involuntary step back. "Who do you think you are?" Victoria demanded, though her voice had lost its edge. "Someone who's heard enough," Julian said evenly. He walked forward until he stood beside Olivia's wheelchair, his presence protective without being overbearing. "You didn't sacrifice anything. You held charity over her head like a weapon. You made her feel small so you could feel important." Victoria's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Julian reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded check, placing it on the counter. "That covers every penny you spent on her wheelchair, her medical bills, and her living expenses for the past 3 years. With interest, she owes you nothing." The store had gone completely silent. "Olivia deserves to be loved without conditions," Julian continued. "Without guilt, without someone constantly reminding her of what she supposedly owes them. You're done." "Here." Victoria grabbed the check, her hands shaking with rage and humiliation. "You'll regret this," she hissed at Olivia. "Both of you will." She stormed out, the door chimes ringing violently in her wake. Olivia stared at Julian, tears streaming down her face. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," he said simply. Then Emma tugged on Olivia's hand. "Don't be sad," the little girl said. "Daddy says family protects family. And you're our family now, right?" Olivia's sob turned into a laugh. "Right." The journey. Julian convinced Olivia to try experimental physical therapy. A new program, he explained, that combined traditional methods with cutting-edge technology. She was hesitant, scared of hoping again, but the way he looked at her, with such absolute faith, made her want to try. The therapy was brutal. Every session left her exhausted and aching. There were days she wanted to quit, Days she screamed in frustration. Days she cried from the pain. But Emma was always there, drawing pictures of Olivia walking, leaving notes like, "You can do it," tucked in her therapy bag. Julian came to every session, never missing one, holding her hand when the pain got too intense, celebrating every tiny victory. 6 months in, something changed. Olivia felt a tingle in her left toe, then her right. The doctors were amazed. The nerve damage had been severe, but somehow, slowly, her body was finding new pathways. 8 months in, she could stand with assistance. 10 months in, she took her first step. Emma cried. Julian cried. Olivia laughed through her tears and took another step, then another. The proposal. 1 year after that horrible blind date, Julian organized a charity gala for road accident victims. He asked Olivia to be his date, but she had other plans. The ballroom was magnificent, filled with Seattle's elite. When Olivia arrived, she walked in on her own 2 feet, using only a discreet cane for balance. She wore a stunning silver gown that caught the light with every step. The room fell silent, then erupted in applause. Julian stood at the front, his expression one of pure awe. Emma ran to Olivia, taking her free hand and walking with her to the stage where her father waited. Deep down. Event coordinator handed Olivia the microphone, but before she could speak, Emma grabbed it. "This is my mommy," the little girl announced proudly. "She's the strongest person ever." More applause, mixed with laughter and tears from the audience. Julian took the microphone gently. "A year ago," he said, his voice carrying across the ballroom, "I watched someone be cruel to a woman who deserved only kindness. Tonight, I'm watching that same woman prove that strength isn't about what your body can do. It's about refusing to let the world make you small." He turned to Olivia and dropped to one knee. The room gasped. "Olivia Bennett," Julian said, pulling out a small velvet box. "You taught my daughter what it means to never give up. You taught me that it's okay to love again. You showed both of us that family isn't just blood. It's choosing each other, every single day." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, elegant and simple, with a single diamond that caught the light. "Will you choose us? Will you let us choose you? Will you marry me?" Olivia's hands covered her mouth, tears streaming freely. She looked at Emma, who was bouncing on her toes with excitement, then back at Julian, this man who had seen her at her lowest and chose to lift her up instead of walk away. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes!" Julian slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms. Emma wrapped her small arms around both of their legs, squealing with joy. The ballroom erupted in celebration, but in that moment, all Olivia could hear was Julian's whispered words in her ear. "Thank you for teaching me how to live again." The beginning. 3 months later, they stood in a small garden ceremony surrounded by close friends and family. Emma was the flower girl, taking her job very seriously as she scattered petals down the aisle. When Olivia walked down that aisle on her own 2 feet, Julian's eyes filled with tears. Not because she was walking, but because she had chosen him, chosen Emma, chosen this life they were building together. During their vows, Olivia said something that made the whole assembly cry. "You saw me when I was invisible. You stood up when everyone else sat down. You held my hand when I couldn't hold my own. You taught me that being broken doesn't mean being worthless. And most importantly, you showed me that the right person doesn't complete you. They inspire you to complete yourself." Julian's vow was simpler. "I promise to see you always, to stand by you always, to love you exactly as you are, always." Emma insisted on adding her own vow. "I promise to draw you lots of pictures and share my toys and love you forever and ever." As they sealed their promises with a kiss, Emma between them, holding both their hands, Olivia thought about that night 1 year ago. The humiliation, the tears, the frosting staining her dress. She wouldn't change a single moment, because that night had led her here, to this man, this child, this family, to a love that didn't need her to be perfect, just present, to a life that celebrated her strength instead of focusing on her limitations. The girl who had been mocked on a blind date had found something more precious than she ever imagined. She had found home, not in a place, but in the hearts of two people who chose to love her. Wheelchairs and canes and all the messy, beautiful complications that came with being human. And as they walked back down the aisle together, Emma skipping between them, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. This story reminds us that true love sees beyond physical limitations. It sees the heart, the strength, the soul. And sometimes the person meant to save you is the one who needs saving just as much. If this story touched your heart, remember that kindness costs nothing but means everything. Stand up for those who need it. Be the person who doesn't walk past. Be the love someone desperately needs.